If you ask somebody, what's your biggest asset? Most people will say, oh, it's my house, my car, maybe it's my 401k, but it's actually your ability to earn income. You have insurance on your house. You have insurance on your car. Do you have insurance on your ability to...
Hey friends, this is Podcast Ruined by a Software Engineer. On this episode, I get to talk to Michael Scarpati, founder and CEO of RetireUS. RetireUS is a financial wellness platform helping everyday users easily access financial experts and learn about incredible financial strategies such as tax loss harvesting, backdoor Roth IRAs, and much more. If you enjoy Podcast Ruined by a Software Engineer, don't forget to hit the follow button on your podcast app so you don't miss out on the new episodes. And you can pick up podcast merch at perrytiu.com/shop. Enjoy the episode. Welcome back to another episode of Podcast Ruined by a Software Engineer. I'm your host, Perry, and today with me is Michael Scarpati, founder and CEO of RetireUS. Michael, how are you today?
What's going on, man?
My anticipation of getting into this topic, I can't, we're going to talk about taxes, we're going to talk about real estate, like longevity, we're talking about all these like maybe loopholes, but not really loopholes because they're technically legal at the end. But anyways, within that short 5 seconds of me going crazy a little bit, I'm more than excited to have you on the show. So thanks again for being on the show.
Dude, I'm pumped to be here.
But even for context though, who is Michael and what is RetireUS?
Yeah, well, so Michael is an entrepreneur. I'm 15 years in the financial services industry and have been an entrepreneur my entire life. And RetireUS is one of those projects. At the end of the day, it's really about helping people achieve financial freedom, helping people master their finances. Being in the business as long as I have, you just, like you said, you learn a lot of these loopholes and processes and ways to build systems, and you gain these resources. And what I found is there's really a gap with the traditional consumer and the traditional investor out there of information, of systems, and RetireUS is here to provide that to everybody. We make it simple, we make it easy, we make it affordable for people to master their finances and work towards financial freedom. And that's really what we're here to do.
That's why I come on saying it's really exciting, because even I notice in my own life per se, where it's like, these concepts of, what do you think about like these tax loss harvesting, which we're probably going to get into a little bit later. But like, as you get to a certain age, more people around you talk about that. But like, for example, in high school, nobody around me talks about that kind of stuff. And that'd be kind of a bit weird if I was talking about that kind of stuff in high school, if anything. So, but this is the part of like demystifying it, right? You've been in the industry for over a decade of talking about all this, I guess like financial literacy, as I would call it, more than anything. But did you always have that in you? That's the fascination part. I might just take a quick second in terms of like, where did you grow up and what did that look like? Where would you call it, like your hometown?
So I'm from Richboro, Pennsylvania. It's a suburb of Philadelphia, so right outside of Philly. And yeah, I mean, for the most part, math was always something that was a strength of mine. But at the end of the day, this information, I didn't gain any of this information until I was really in the business. And I think that's one of the weird components of financial services. It's not really something that we're taught in, our primary schools, even in college. A lot of the finance you learn is more corporate finance. It's not really personal finance. And so I went into this, I was an international business major. So I wasn't a financial planning major, and launched into a career as a financial planner with an organization called McAdam Financial back in 2010, and really started to learn on the job. And over time, you learn a lot. You see a lot, you learn a lot. And now I really want to share that info at the end of the day.
One thing that I know a lot of people relate to is, the term savings, right? I mean, as you get older, there's a lot of ways of talking about savings. But even as a kid, the first time we think about like savings and allowance, I remember it was kind of like I would go to school and my parents would have maybe like $25 for me for a week, if I remember correctly. And they really let me like free rein in terms of how I manage that $25 every week. You want to eat a little bit more on Mondays? Go for it. You want to eat a little bit less? But maybe for you though, what was that concept? What was the first time you remember having that concept in your life? Because of course, it's going to be expounding on that.
I got $20 to mow my mom's lawn. That was my first foray into saving, and I would always stash it away. I was always a saver. I come from a family actually on my mom's side. Her father was a banker, totally self-made guy. Started as the janitor at this bank, worked his way up to become the president and the CEO of the bank. But that banker mentality was definitely instilled in me at a young age. Just the power of saving, and those habits were created definitely young. And it was just like any kid. I would mow the lawn, get my 20 bucks, stash it away, and try to save up for a video game or something along those lines.
Yeah, and up in Canada, it's about shoveling snow. That was the other big one, where it's
Was
like
it?
going down the street and be like, "Hey, do you want me to shovel that or anything?" And of course, I'm a geeky guy at the end of the day. What was, I guess, like the first piece of technology that you really remember from back then? Was it a computer, or was it like a PS, or what was the first like taste of technology, as I keep on saying? Because of course, RetireUS today, technology company if anything. But what do you remember from back then?
What's funny is that I was not allowed to have video games as a kid. It was a hard no by my parents, and that's I think that's where some of the entrepreneurial spirit came in, because I think by the time I was like 12 or 13, I used some of this money that I saved up. I finally just went out and made a deal with somebody who was getting rid of, I think they were getting rid of their NES. And because at that time PlayStation, N64, all that stuff was out, and they were ready to get rid of their original Nintendo, so I bought it off of them for like 50 or 60 bucks. Was
Good.
Yeah, that, I mean, but we just had like the house computer was an old school gateway back in the day. We had the gateway tower computer.
And I'm pretty sure they still work. They're probably more robust than most computers nowadays, if anything. So,
I mean, the thing was a behemoth.
if anything, it's probably nailed to the wall. But no, we're not talking about that era of like just these massive consoles. But no, I keep on saying this because that influence like really does help. Because even that mind of like partially saving, but also understanding that like, hey, if you save enough, you could buy bigger things, but also like using the technology to begin with. We keep on seeing that like, oh, kids with their toys nowadays.
Yeah.
We were the same back then with any kind of thing. All the Sega Dreamcast and the computers, the Apples, and then the Windows coming in. But one thing that I guess like we kind of just like go through childhood and education and all of that, and then at some point you do end up having more like a major into, you're talking about international business, and then like even going into the finance, like financial advising to begin with. And there's a point where it's like you're officially doing it, and we're going to talk about a little bit like the lessons you've learned, like the stories of course of being a financial advisor. But what usually is required for somebody to be a financial advisor? Is it you do your program and then boom, you could start being a financial advisor? Or what was that path for you look like when you officially got into the business?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's licenses. There's a series of licenses. The series 6 or 7. So depending on which series license you have, just kind of varies in what types of investments that you can work with for clients. So series 7, and then the series 66 allows you to actually charge for financial advice. And so, those two to get together combined are necessary. And then as a financial advisor, as a financial planner, really, financial advisor, there's so much nomenclature that we'll demystify a little bit throughout today, just kind of how different types of advisors work, because I think that's one key thing that a lot of people just don't fully understand. The industry is riddled with various conflicts of interest and institutional power, and it definitely trickles down to the end consumer in a not super positive way a lot of times. So I'd love to get into that, but at the end of the day, you're in 2 to 3 industries kind of simultaneously if you're doing real comprehensive planning. The first is the securities industry. That's where those securities licenses come in. So the first step was you got to get your Series 7, you got to get your Series 66. You're also in the insurance industry if you're doing comprehensive planning, which is run at the state level. So FINRA, SEC, federal level for securities. On the insurance side, it's at the state level. So you have to get some sort of a producer license, life, accident, health insurance, because most people have risks that need to be transferred for life insurance, for disability, for long-term care, for some of those other pieces of the comprehensive financial planning pie. And then The third is the banking industry. That's not something that you necessarily need a license to support clients for, but at the end of the day, those products, those services are just governed differently as well, have some different layers to it. So you're kind of navigating these three different pieces, these three different channels for a client, and you gotta really get in there and kind of learn all of them. So it was a long process. It's like a 12 to 24 month, depending on who you are. That's the learning curve to get up and running and really be able to communicate this stuff and start getting clients at a kind of like a regular cadence.
And I can imagine, as you were saying, like learning a lot of it on the job, but even before you were doing the job, there was so much you had to learn to even get to that point. So, which is why I came out saying that like this transition into officially doing it is so amazing, because you've put the legwork even before officially doing the financial advising for any firms out there, if anything. One thing that is always, I'm geeking out about this, that like I like the day-to-day stories. You've done financial advising for over a decade, if anything. You've heard many stories, but what is a financial advisor? Because like today, of course, when we talk about RetireUS, there's a lot of products that is catered to this like mindset of like advising on somebody's financial health, if anything, right? So even back then, without like all the tools that is available today, what was like a day-to-day for a financial advisor? Was it just sitting down with clients like back to back, like an hour each, and just go through everybody's like planning anything, or was there like another more systematic way that you were doing your advising at the end?
Perry, I wish it was as simple as we were able to, we had a volume of clients where we were just sitting in an office and they were coming in. The reality was this was an eat what you kill type of a career trajectory to start. And so that's, if you're doing independent financial planning, the big part of that is independent. You're on your own. You're partnered with a company or some sort of a firm that is there to help support your growth and show you the ropes, teach you the industry, and you're also responsible for getting all your clients yourself. And so most of the time was spent training, learning how to have conversations, communicate effectively on these topics, and then out going and getting leads. We were marketing. We were our schedule to start. It was 9 to 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, 9 to 5 on Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday, my partner Mike Blausch and I would go to various home shows, tabling events is what we called them, where we would set up a table, we'd do some sort of a raffle for some wine, something along those lines, meet a bunch of people Thursday or Saturday and Sunday, and gather leads. Those leads we would dial the next week from 5 to 8 p.m. every night, Monday through Thursday, 1 to 5 o'clock on Friday, and then the process would repeat itself. And we would be lucky. Most of the meetings too were out of the office, right? So we were doing these events within like a hour and a half to 2 hour radius from our office in Philadelphia. And once we finally were able to have a good conversation with someone, we would set that meeting. We would be driving, 60, 90 minutes just to sit at someone's kitchen table. That's where this business was done prior to COVID. That was the norm. And, hope to be able to get them as a client. So that was the grind for the first, that's the first like 2 to 5 years in the independent channel, is really, in the trenches, learning the business through reps, but also out there just finding who you can help, because especially when you're that green in the industry, it's not that easy to get people to be comfortable with hiring you, as a 22, 23-year-old kid out of college, and you're saying, hey, let me manage your life savings. Like, a little bit of a hard sales pitch.
But that's why every win counts so much, right? Every time you get that.
Yeah.
And the fun part about this, where you're combining, like, as we were saying, like creativity in terms of like making it work, whether it's a raffle for something or whether a different way of engaging people, like that's part of, what you had to do at that time. And then I'm just imagining, like, as a techie person, we talk about the traveling salesman problem a lot, where it's like the most efficient way of visiting these many people in the least amount of time and everything. Like, you were living it, basically. You were that like traveling financial person at the end of the day. But one of the things that you mentioned that was really, really, I guess, like good to appreciate is going independent, as you were saying, right? A lot of it relies on you just because, like, for somebody, like I work full-time at the moment. I know the infrastructure that is required to run a full-time operation. There's a lot of stuff I don't need to do because another team is taking care of it. But when you were doing that, do you remember what exactly were the pieces? Because one parallel I could think of was you were saying, oh, a lot of financial advising touches securities, touches insurance, touches banking a little bit. But as you and your partner, for example, you don't have 8 arms. Or I hope you don't have 8 arms under that shirt, if anything. But do you remember that approach? Because that's eventually going to lead you to RetireUS, obviously. But do you remember that approach back then of, did you go for maybe one side more? Or what was it? Was it just throw a lot of things at the wall and see what sticks? Or
Yeah, it was, the good thing is that you weren't in it alone in terms of the actual planning and strategy, that the case design for the clients. So we had mentors and we had planning support that were teaching us, and we were kind of learning through them in the beginning. So that was a big component of it. However, everything else was on your shoulders because you didn't have a support staff, you didn't have any money to hire one. And one of the things that we did actually really early in the process was we started to create apprenticeship programs. So we felt just the challenge of coming directly out of college. You have no money, you come into this industry and you have no salary now, and you're out there and you got to build your book of business and you have to learn everything on the job. And there's 50 hats you're wearing. You're your salesperson, you're your marketing team, you're your administrative, right? You're the paraplanner, you are the financial planner in the meeting. It's just, there's so much there that a lot of once you finally started to get success in clients, then it was just like pile on the hats and take them on, take them off. And so we felt the first 2 years in the business, we were, one of the things that all the advisors would kind of talk about is, I wish we just knew this when we were in college. I wish we learned some of this when we were, before we actually come in here and, your life's kind of on the line financially. A lot of people, the turnover ratio in the business is really high in the first 6 months, really the first 2 years, but people were dropping like flies because if you can't, one client means everything to you at that stage. And if you just have a slow start or that learning curve is a little bit longer for you, it's challenging. So we made a program right after we kind of turned that corner. We built a program for college students to come in while they were at school and start to learn the business and learn some of the operations. They were able to take some of that weight off of us. And that blossomed into a formal co-op program. Both Blausch and myself, our alma mater, St. Joseph's University, we had a formal program with them for many years. Same with Drexel University in Philadelphia, LaSalle University. And we actually created this program. We were getting people licensed while they were still in school. So they were getting some of those licenses out of the way. They were learning how to contact prospects. They were learning how to actually hold meetings with introductory, just discovery meetings, and we were training them all those things before they even graduated. And that's actually the bulk of the RetireUS team now. And the financial services side of that business organically came through that program. So all of our group is actually from those apprenticeship programs that we started back in 2012, 2013.
That's incredible. You've invested in the academy, as I would call
Yeah,
it. Or
maybe.
people in the English football world, right? You've invested in the academy, the La Masia for the Barcelona fans out there. And also, deep rep of the Philly area. So I really appreciate that too. Like, that sounds absolutely awesome on
rep
that.
Philly.
If I could tie a lot of this together is, you end up meeting a bajillion people, and a bajillion people has a bajillion different problems. For example, like you have the Tom Brady's out there where it's like, oh, we have too much money. What are we going to do with it? And there's other people who also have like a different scenario where it's like they're barely scraping by every week and everything. So all your learnings kind of, is it fair to say it formalized like a framework and a plan that eventually became RetireUS? So, because I want to definitely obviously dive into RetireUS and there's so many aspects to it. Number one, we're talking about like how do you manage people's finances? There's words that we could get into in terms of like basic planning, tax mastery, wealth mastery, all that. And then there's the other part of like, oh, now that we know what those are, what tools do you get? So if we jump into the first part maybe a little bit in terms of like maybe even higher level, what is, I guess, like what is money management? Perry, I get a bit of money, and then like my impression of money management might be different than more of a generic term. So if we start there, like I guess what would level set people?
I'm glad you went there. That's a great place to start. So there's really three types of financial professionals that somebody can work with. And this is key. So there's three types of financial professionals. The first is the benefits professional. So through the workplace, most companies have 401k, deferred comp, something along the lines that the employees can utilize to save for retirement. There is a rep that is associated with helping you with that account. They are not going to talk about anything outside of the workplace, right? Out of their scope, out of their contract. It's just what are the fees? What are the investments? What are the features of the benefits that you have access to, right? So that's the first type. Second type is a products-based advisor, and this dominates the industry. So when you say money management, this is what most people think when they think of a financial advisor, financial planner, financial professional. About 80% of all of the reps that are in the industry end up in this product spoke. And when I say products, it's just because no matter what they advise on, all roads lead to products, because that's ultimately how they're going to be compensated, right? They're either going to charge some sort of a fee to manage money, and that means putting it in a portfolio, spreading it across different mutual funds or positions, stocks, bonds, alternatives, and they're managing that money and they're looking to grow that pie, right? Or they're positioning these assets in insurance products or just direct with institutions. And this is just, it just dominates the industry. Because of this, most of the advisors that work in that space, they don't actually really work for you. They're not creating an agreement with Perry that binds them as a fiduciary in this process and works for you. Most of the time they work for the organization, or many times it's the institution, right? So Fidelity is a good example. You work with an advisor at Fidelity, they don't really work for you, right? They work for Fidelity. Fidelity is a giant mutual fund company. So their plan also, what is it going to revolve around? It's going to revolve around Fidelity, right? Same if you work with somebody at Vanguard. That's kind of the nature of the industry. And that's why it just dominates. And so there's always a little bit of a misconception about, what does a true independent financial planner do versus a money manager, that type of financial advisor. That leads us to the third type of advisor. And that's what I like to call a systems-based advisor. A systems-based advisor is the independent. They're a fiduciary. They have what's called an open architecture when it comes to vetting different types of investments. But at the crux of it, they're really focused on building you personal financial system. So it's actually more of a focus on process than product. It's more of a focus on how are all these variables working together and how do we need to position them in a way that they're all communicating and are constantly ebbing and flowing off of one another. Your different products. So it's a systems-based approach is just a totally different model. The issue is that those types of professionals are generally really expensive, right? So to work with that type, because they're not incentivized by product, they are here to work for you and to build a system as a fiduciary. It's anywhere from $5,500 a year to $7,000 on average a year to just, out of pocket, write this person a check to be on retainer for a year and work, for you on your behalf. And that's one of the things that RetireUS has solved. So the tech and the platform connects people and gives you access to that type of a professional for your systems, to build you personalized systems from a certified financial planner that is independent, has an open architecture, actually is bound as a fiduciary, and is going to build you a system. And we were able to get that price point down by about 90% for our basic planning tier. So from $5,000 to a little under $500 a year, you can work with this level of professional. It's just it's something that we're really proud of because we believe everybody deserves access to this. It's just a different it's a different approach. It's different type and level of advice, and it makes a difference.
The magnitude of the feat is always impressive, right? If you give a quality service, people are like, oh yes, because I'm paying like astronomically insane amount of money, especially money managers. But even my initial impression of just saying the word money manager, like my misunderstanding of the different categories, as you were saying, these different types, the product-based one, the system-based one, like you're not afraid to call out these different categories because you see it that there's maybe some conflict of interest, right? As people are saying that, hey, if I'm somebody working at AXA or whatever, like I don't know why I'm calling out some of those like insurance company at the end of the day. Yeah, like I'm gonna tell you things that end up making more money for whoever I represent behind me at the end of the day, as opposed to, as you were saying, the I guess like philosophy behind RetireUS, the systems based approach to it. This is something that I'm obviously going to ask you a couple of questions about because, like, number one, I didn't really know it exists until very recently, and number two, when you're talking about this architecture and like, of course, there's like it's financially like you have a financial obligation to really help like the people behind it. And the second part, we're also gonna jump into how did you make it so affordable to like me and you on the street basically on that. That's definitely like the impressive part, if anything. But one thing I do want to like understand from like I'm a human that like, hey, I want to understand my finance better. There's different, I'm assuming, would you call those like levels, I guess, or like how would you call these different like what's the minimum requirement knowledge of a as a person like me, and what's like the next level behind that, and what's the next level behind that?
Yeah, to work with us, to work with somebody through our platform, there's no minimum anything required, and that's one of the. There's three major reasons, right? So I'll give you a couple stats that are kind of crazy. Over half of Americans are more concerned with running out of money than death. How about that? They're more concerned with 92% of Americans are report being stressed. American workforce, 92 are stressed about their finances. Like 66% say they're more worried about running out of money than death. And of that group of the American consumer, over 30% or over 70% of people say that they would like to work with some sort of a financial professional. Only about 30% do, though. So why? That seems kind of outrageous, right? There's a clear need here. People want the guidance. They feel stressed and concerned, but not a lot of people are taking action. And it comes down to three reasons. It's cost, it's accessibility, and it's time. Those are the three major reasons. Cost, right? One, people don't want to pay the $5,000+ a year, and who can blame them, to work with somebody who they know for sure is working for them, right? A lot of people are starting to catch on to the idea that this industry is just riddled with conflicts, and you don't really know, they don't want to work with an advisor and just feel like they're kind of being sold and pressured into putting money in certain places without that badge of knowing, hey, this person actually is working for me, right? And working in my best interest. And the cost that was too high. So people are priced out of the market. Most people, I mean, the industry is so top heavy towards the 1% to 2% of wealth earners. And that's really what we want to solve for. We're probably one of the only financial companies, if you will, that has gotten more and more footing in the industry and experience. And instead of moving up market, we're trying to do the opposite, right? Advisor gets their footing, they start to move up market, meaning, oh, now I have a $250,000 minimum before I'm going to meet with you, or a $500,000. Now I'm at $1 million. Now I'm at $2 million. We're doing the complete opposite. We want to, instead of trying to work with the 1% to 2%, we want to support the 98%. That's the mission of RetireUS, and cost was the first barrier for us to reduce in order to make that possible. The second is this idea of accessibility, and it's really kind of like what you said. Like, do I even qualify for this? Do I have enough savings, right? Do I have enough knowledge to actually work with somebody? There's this kind of like self-judgment factor that exists out there. Like, oh, I don't want to get out there and kind of look like an idiot. I know I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm going to go sit here and talk with this big financial professional, and they don't talk to people like me. Like, that's what you hear a lot of, right? And it's just not the case. Everybody deserves this advice. And the people that can actually benefit from it the most are the ones that are either just getting started or have had savings. There's so many people out there, Perry, that have savings, and it's just not $1,000,000, right? It's just, and they think that, oh, well, they have 50 grand saved, they have 100 grand saved. Like, that's a lot of money that needs to be looked at in a way that is meaningful and impactful. And there's this fear component that people, don't want to step in to have those conversations. And the last one's just time. I mean, this is like, if you've ever done your taxes, right? Every time that April's coming around, you're probably going, oh man, dude, I don't want to gather all this stuff up and get it to the accountant or go through the TurboTax. It's just like that. The process of getting organized can just be like such a bear to look at and just get started and take the first step. And that was the other objective of the platform, right? Is just to make the onboarding process a little more streamlined, and we can kind of get into it, but creating this planning cycle that doesn't make it a process to have to swallow the entire ocean to actually get started. We can get started quickly and easily, and at least have some meaningful conversations without needing to spend 4 or 5 hours gathering data. So that's really the disconnect right now that's out there. There's definitely a knowledge and understanding disconnect. Like you said, people are just unconsciously incompetent. They don't know what they don't know about the industry, about how it works. And that's one of the things that I'm really focused on right now with this push, is just getting the message out there, helping to educate people, helping people understand how it all works and how it can benefit them.
I like the part where there are people who are embarrassed about how dumb they are about money. Not the fact that they waste money, it's the fact that they don't know enough about their own money, about their own system. Where there's a point in my life where I was like, oh yeah, I do this, tell me if it's dumb or not. But not everybody would do that, right? Because if you don't say anything, you're not able to receive feedback, if anything. So I do understand everything you were describing, all of that. I do know there are people out there, me sometimes, where if I feel dumb about my money tactic, I won't share it. And it sounds really weird. But the other part to that is actually in terms of, it's so open in terms of how you're treating this problem. When you're talking about, let's help the 98% out there, right? No, everybody wants to be Tom Brady's manager. I use the example a lot. Like everybody wants to be Messi's money manager. It makes no sense in terms of how feasible it is. Maybe if you're top at the end of the day. But the one thing about RetireUS actually is that even just from you guys existing, there's already so many good resources. And the whole point is that we love tips. We as in just me, anybody that has a bit of saving, we love tips, and we love to figure out what can we do better with it than just leaving it in the bank. Don't leave your money in the bank. I feel like that's not even a tip. That's an anti-tip, if anything. But one thing that is shared from RetireUS directly is these concept of, I guess, layers maybe. There's the mindfulness part, and then there's the basic planning part. And then we talk about tax mastery, which is obviously a little bit more complex. And then even more complex is the wealth mastery. But even from your own term, do you want to give a quick overall in terms of what's the difference between these, I guess, 4 parts to it? Because it definitely helps understanding that.
Yeah. So one of the things that we were really focused on is how can we make this simpler, right? So that there's definitely a issue, I just think, in our industry is it's quick to get kind of complex, and it can be overwhelming. And we wanted to figure out, well, how can we make this actually more approachable for everybody? And I cannot take credit for these 6 milestones. This is something that was created by the College of Financial Planning, the American Association of Financial Planners. They wanted a standard definition and process of what constitutes legitimate and effective financial planning. And it was these 6 key areas of financial planning. It's your current situation, it's your short-term savings, your risk and insurance, your retirement, your taxes, and then ultimately your estate or your legacy. And so what we did is we kind of refactored that a little bit into 4 of these levels of financial wellness, right? Of financial consciousness. And level 1 being your current situation, just being mindful, right? We call that mindfulness, and we have a free program to help you become more mindful, at least of your current situation, on retire.us. And it's just mastering the now, right? And it's kind of that idea of becoming consciously competent, right? And that's the biggest issue that people have, is they're unconsciously incompetent. They don't know what they don't know. And so life is happening, and human beings are creatures of habit. You either have good ones or you have bad ones. If you haven't read the book Atomic Habits, James Clear, pick it up. It will change your life. And a lot of what we built RetireUS around is some of those frameworks that he created, and it's helping people start to cultivate good financial habits. That's mindfulness. That's financial mindfulness. It's that current situation. What did we spend? What do we save? What's the difference in what we would call discretionary cash flow? What's our critical cash flow? What are the things we need to be spending on? And then what's that discretionary cash flow? That's the extra money that we can either save or we can spend. And it's just being mindful of what's actually happening so that we can start to cultivate wealth-based habits. And that's level one.
I'm the person that's part to be like, hey, do you guys like actually know how much you spend on like groceries a month? Like, this is literally a party topic that I would come out with. And it sounds stupid, but it's the part where you're describing this mindfulness, right? This part of like, some people don't even know how much you're spending in a month. Some people would do takeout every single day. No judgment on that, but it does add up. If you do takeout every single day, it will be a couple of grands every month that you could have just maybe reduce in half if you started cooking for the other part. So it's this mindfulness of seeing where everybody is, and those are kind of like, I keep on saying just baseline of what everybody does, like your income. Like some people like immediately just have a budget to be like, this is grocery and this is going to like maybe play money if anything, and doing that. But as you were saying, like there is a lot of like, maybe, how do you call it, like agnostic about it, in the sense of like people really don't care about where the money goes. So that's where I guess the mindfulness kicks in. But eventually when we talk about the basic planning part, as you were saying, like the way you guys were factoring this concept, that pushes a little bit more than just, I guess, like savings, right? What does that include that isn't part of just the basic mindfulness of?
Yeah, so basic planning is kind of the foundation. So what are the real core components of creating a financial foundation for yourself, for your household? And it's building off of the current situation. Everything starts with the current situation, right? If we don't master the current situation, we can't then prioritize our cash flow to other areas, and we can't really get a grasp on our goals. Our lifestyle dictates future lifestyle. We're planning for something like retirement. And so it's adding 3 more layers on that, 3 more milestones, which is risk and insurance. And that kind of comes next, right? Because a lot of times people don't want to spend time thinking about insurance, but it's actually a key component. One of the things that most people don't insure is actually their income. And it's arguably the biggest asset that we all have, right? Is our ability to earn income, right? If you ask somebody, what's your biggest asset? Most people will say, oh, it's my house, it's my car, maybe it's my 401k, but it's actually your ability to earn income. And for that, you have insurance on your house, you have insurance on your car. Do you have insurance on your ability to earn income? Is a question that we always ask people. So through the workplace, you generally have some sort of long-term disability benefit. I'll give you a little tip here, depending on if you have long-term disability offered through the workplace, depending on how you pay for the benefit will actually impact how you receive the benefit. So if you pay for it as a pre-tax deduction, which is standard, just like you do with your 401k contributions, you're going to receive the benefit pre-tax, before taxes. If you pay after tax, might be a couple dollars more, right? Because these things are only 10, 15, 20 bucks generally across the month. You receive the benefit after tax, and you end up, when you do the math, you end up getting more in your pocket. So quick little tip for you on the disability insurance side: if you're paying through it now through the workplace and you can pay for it after tax, do it. It always helps to, if you need it. But so those types of things need to just be evaluated, right? If we can't work, what happens, right? Does that destroy the rest of the plan, right? Or can we still continue to make ends meet and even continue to cultivate financial freedom for the future? Same with the life insurances, and that definitely circles back again for the retirees around healthcare, long-term care, healthcare. And then, from there, it's your short-term goals and your retirement, right? Those are the 4 components of creating a financial foundation. At RetireUS, we call that basic planning. That's the basics.
Yeah, I didn't even know that you could pay for your medical expenses before taxes until I was obviously working with an employer that had that plan to begin with. So even the fact that you're sharing a lot of this is people get to learn at some points in their life. And for me it was, yeah, until I actually got to set it up and everything. That was an eye opener.
And this is just for the disability insurance. So different from the medical insurance. This would be, your Aflac or your MetLife disability, the DI voluntary benefit. And some employers let you do it, some don't.
But it's still something that is actionable for those who are
Yeah.
actually like with this. It's actionable immediately, if anything.
Yeah.
So definitely go review that if this sounds absolutely interesting. One of the other points about even in this as you're saying, like building a foundation is passive income. I feel like when you're talking about like the retirement bit and all of that, what I guess like you've advised, you've seen so many stories in that sense, but I guess what were some of the like more looked over part of passive income that people just assume like, oh, it's either not worth doing, or what kind of like passive income, or like what you should know about your own passive income early on rather than later in your life?
Yeah, I'm a big believer of passive income. One of the benefits of being in this industry is I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of very successful people in terms of, the business world, and you get to kind of see some themes as you work with people that are, have multiple millions of dollars in assets. And one of the things that I found is multiple streams of income is a good recipe for success, both in the short term and long term. Now, doesn't mean you want to spread yourself thin and being a jack of all trades and a master of none. However, there are some great ways that you can get passive income. One of the themes that I always saw was real estate, right? All of these people that really built financial success, one of the common themes was always some piece of real estate or real estate that's been passed through family, through generations. Generational real estate was one of the major tools that I've seen of people building wealth and just maintaining it and creating easy passive income, right? If you have a good real estate property, you can hire a property manager and you kind of don't need to do anything. As long as you have tenants, the income comes in, and it's one of the easiest. It's not easy to get there, but once it's established and your systems are set up, it was always something that you would see. And then that extra income, a lot of times you'd see these individuals, they'd use it, they'd save it, then they'd buy another property and buy another property and buy another property. And it was definitely a theme of these laddered strategies for passive income just through real estate. But you can also do it in the investment world too. In the traditional investment world right now, believe it or not, one of the best ways for some passive income actually is the traditional bank right now. With interest rates as high as they are, we're in an odd time in recent history, but you're able to get 4.5%-5% interest on your money right now in the traditional bank. That is, at least in our lifetime, man, that's kind of been unheard of.
Warren Buffett puts like billions of like bonds,
Right.
that gets like, it sits there 5%, 5.5%, which equals to more billions at the end of the day. It is a sight to see. If anything, we don't really get to see a lot of that.
Yeah. And there's some of those too, right? Traditional treasury bonds. There's different types of corporate bonds. Those types of investments can be great tools for passive income. Now they all have their own different risks that we can definitely get into, right? Everything has a risk. It's just you're transferring them from different types, whether it's stocks, whether it's bonds, whether it's even cash in the bank, right? We saw Silicon Valley Bank a year ago or so with that implosion. That's money's gone when that stuff happens.
First Republic.
Right.
We're just listening. The thing is, like, these are the fun part of like being able to have this conversation. And of course, at RetireUS, you're echoing a lot of this, right? The whole point is that you're not trying to hide these like methods or these ways of doing it. It's that it exists and you can have an impact immediately tomorrow. Everything that you've just mentioned in the sense of like, think about how much you're saving, but think about what you're doing with that saving. You can put it in the bonds or even in the banks or CDs, whatever you want. And then we're talking about passive income, compounding it. Take that money. If you want to invest into real estate, start with one and then into two. Those are all proven ways of doing this, and it requires experience, which you and your team is bringing into a lot of it. And there's always a point where you get past the like common people knowledge when we get a little bit into, I guess, like this planning part called tax mastery. Like you can't just wake up and and know what's in there, but maybe in general, like we already like skimmed it a little bit, but tax mastery, there's a lot of terms related to it in terms of like reducing your taxable incomes. And when we're talking about like tax deferring, we talked about that, right? Tax deferring, they're also tax free to some extent. And there's also this concept of RMD as well. I feel like this all fits into tax mastery, but am I correct? Like, what do these terms mean in this planning?
Yeah, so this is one of the things that I'm very passionate about in this process is getting these secrets out there. I mean, there is when you've been able to work with, listen, over the past close to 15 years, I have worked with high net worth executives in the public sector and the private sector, people with generational wealth, and there's just a certain way that these individuals manage their life, manage their personal finances. And I don't mean that by what types of stocks and bonds. There's systems, there's processes, there's, like you said, these tax loopholes, and there's things that people are hyper aware of. And taxes are one of them. The tax deferral for retirement accounts is the best trick that the IRS has ever created. And most people have no idea why. So required minimum distributions, RMDs, right? Required minimum distributions. It is the the IRS is beautifully tricky, and it's all by design the way that they have created these processes. Let me give you a quick little breakdown of how this works. So you have your 401k, right, Perry? You're putting, let's say you're maxing it out 18 plus thousand a year. You're getting a match from your employer, right? Maybe 20 plus $1,000 a year is going into this tax deferred, and you're getting a tax deduction on it. That feels pretty good, right? You're paying less taxes now. Well, you're kicking that can down the road. So there's a couple things that people don't really recognize. The first is right now, we are in one of the lowest tax rate environments in US history when it comes to marginal tax rates. When you look back into time, prior to the 80s, some of the highest marginal tax rates were 90%, right? If you're in those top earning brackets, that top piece was 90% was your tax rate. And it's been in the 90s, it's been the 70s. Now we're a little below 40% is that highest marginal tax rate. So we're in one of the lowest tax rate environments in US history. Number two, we have the most debt as a country that we've ever had, and it's been exponentially growing really for the last 10 years. So we have a lot of debt, and we're in the lowest tax rate environment in history. It's very logical to surmise that taxes will go up in the future in terms of how we're going to ultimately manage this stuff. It's just the numbers don't add up is the reality. So just take that, hang on to that for a little bit. Now let me explain to you how this required minimum distribution thing works. So you defer this money in your 401k, $20,000 a year. It's growing, compounding interest, tax deferred. We're not paying any interest every year. You don't pay until you take the money out of the account. So here's what happens to a lot of people is they're concerned about retirement, so they aggressively are saving. And they're not just, there's limits on what they can save in their 401k and their IRAs. So they save in a couple avenues. They save in just general after-tax accounts and brokerage accounts. They might be saving into Roth accounts. And flash forward, now they're 65, and they also have Social Security kicks on, right? Medicare kicks in, so their healthcare costs are lower than they probably expected. And they have this other money. They kind of use that, right? Some people have pensions. If you have pensions, watch out, because required minimum distributions are coming for you. If you have pensions, required minimum distributions are coming for you. And here's why. It's because people don't touch the money, right? Or they don't take enough of it, right? It's very rare that somebody retires and then they just spend down all of their IRA. The IRA, for whatever reason, ends up getting pushed to the back, and it's, wait, maybe when I need it money. Well, what happens is that money continues to grow, and at 72, used to be 70 and a half, now it's 72, moving to 73, might even be 75. uh, what happens is the IRS says you have to take the money out and you have to pay taxes on it. It's called a required minimum distribution, and it starts small, right? It's a percentage that grows every year that you get older. The percentage increases. So it starts like around 3%, then closer to 4, and then 5. It's not an issue when you're 72. It's an issue when you're 86, when you're 95, and you're taking, this money is continuing to compound. It's continuing to grow. And now we do these, we model it. So in the requirement, we call it an RMD roadmap. We're modeling this out to help people see you have a spouse, you a husband and a wife. They both have IRAs. If they both have pensions, like I'm telling you, it becomes a problem because they don't touch these IRAs. They're in their 80s or in their 90s. They have to take out $500,000 a year and pay taxes on it, on top of their pension, on top of their Social Security, right? So they're getting bumped into these higher marginal tax brackets because the more taxable income you have, the higher the brackets you are. It's the best trick in the book. So they wait and they get you, right? You sit here and you get your deferrals now to not be in the 28% tax bracket, maybe get down to the 24, but you start to model this out. By the time people are in their retirement, they're in the 39 because, and that's just now at these tax rates now, because their taxable income has piled on to the point where they're getting pushed up in these higher tax brackets. It's insanity. It's crazy. And the amount of money that you can actually save by proactively understanding that, right? Seeing what that is and starting to convert money, we call that tax diversification, is actually moving money from tax deferred positions to tax-free positions and creating tax shelters and kind of getting ahead of some of those tax liabilities in the future. That's where his tax mastery starts coming into play.
I wasn't worried about this at all, but the more you kept on talking, the more anxious I got. I was like, oh my goodness. Like, I'm glad we're having this chat. I'm glad people are listening to this chat, if anything, because, like, without actually actively thinking about this and doing something about it, as we're saying, that's how they get you. That's how they get you in that system, dude.
I hate to sound like that. Like, that's how they're coming for you, but like, it's just the way it works because nobody thinks about it, right? It's one of those things. It's unconsciously incompetent. Like, that is the theme on this one. People don't know what they don't know until that first requirement of distribution comes, or they're kind of like 3 or 4 years away and they're like, hey, yeah, you know what? I know I got to take something soon. And it's like, now it's too late because trying to convert and get the money out of those positions, you're on a really tiny window. So it's just, and it's not in the public domain. Yeah, that's what a lot of, why I wanted to come on your podcast is get this. It's information that this is not part of the public discourse. It's just not. And I don't know, the conspiracy theorist in me wants to say that's by design. The IRS is like, because why is this not talked about? Everyone that has a retirement account is going to be impacted by it. Yet you never hear anything about this stuff.
This is where the guidance and the advising is very welcome. As in, like, if there's not this extra, I guess, like, whether third person, whatever party that you can actually go to and ask all these questions, then you'll never know about it. And that's why, as you're saying, like, democratizing this information, this knowledge is such a fascinating part with RetireUS, and that's really what drives you and your whole team at the end of the day. So I think that's absolutely a fantastic topic of conversation. If anybody wants to have it, of course, retire.us, check it out over there. But I do want to take that couple of moments to talk about that next planning level, as in, like, we can talk about taxes all day. We talk about how, like, the bajillionaires, they never take out they invest their stock, but they never sell it because all they do, they just take a loan against it, and the interest is really low, so they just spend that kind of money. But that's obviously a very specific case and everything. But when we're talking about tax mastery, those are all the different tricks that could jump into that. But then I guess, like, the next level on top of that, the next planning, I'm not saying level, but the next way of thinking about it is wealth mastery, where you think about, as we're saying, like, maybe leaving your real estate to your successors, like the people around you, or even just like the complex employer benefits for some people living maybe in the tech world is very prominent. But
Yeah.
From your perspective of it, this wealth mastery, how is that different than tax mastery at the end of the day?
So I'll pile onto our example from tax mastery. So it gets more nefarious, Perry. It gets more nefarious. Ready? So the IRS, they're pretty smart. They're pretty tricky. So guess what happens when you are in that? Let's say you're now 75 years old, right? You're in this required minimum distribution phase. Say you have $1 million saved in retirement accounts, and you have you have just one child, right? One beneficiary. Well, if you're in required minimum distribution phase and you pass away, your kid, your beneficiary, inherits that money, and now the IRS is going to make them take the money out over a 10-year period. They have to withdraw all the money in that account over a 10-year period. Right? So this is a result of the Secure Act. You used to be able to stretch these required minimum distributions for your own age or continue on the path that it was on for whoever's account it was prior to inheritance. Not anymore, right? So what it does is you got $1 million. Most people, when they inherit money, they're generally in their highest earning years as a professional, right? When that tends to happen. And now you're piling on, in this case, you had $1 million, a minimum of $100,000 in taxable income on top of the money that you're making now, pushing you up into higher tax brackets for a 10-year period because you inherited this money. Like, this is how it works. So, right, this is part of your legacy plan. It's a really bad legacy plan. If your legacy plan is to essentially gift your retirement accounts to your beneficiaries, 2024 and moving forward right now, that's a bad legacy plan, because the IRS has these stipulations of the way that this actually is going to work. It's not about inheritance tax. That's not actually the issue. It's the income tax on the asset that's going to be inherited and the stipulations that come with it. And so it's tricky, man. It's really tricky the way this stuff works. And so when we're talking wealth mastery, we're looking at, we're doing a holistic process, but we're starting all the way at that end point, right? So in the wealth mastery tier, you're looking, all right, we're gonna talk about retirement, we're gonna talk about risk, we're gonna talk about taxes, but let's also talk about the end of this process, right? And we kind of can put all those components in, we can model it out and get a pretty solid projection on what someone's ending value of their estate's going to be, but more importantly, how the accounts, like the tax status of that money. And legacy planning is all about, one, having a system of how to minimize taxation when things pass to the next generation, or have what we call a multi-generational wealth transfer strategy. And it's about the control of that money, right? A lot of people don't care about that, but that's when you start talking about things like trusts, right? Trusts come into play. A trust, the simplest way I was ever taught about what a trust is, it's a way to control assets from the grave, right? That's really, at the end of the day, there's ways that you can leverage different trusts to circumvent, probate and other things in complex estate planning. But really, what a trust does is it allows you to dictate terms of how the money is going to be used for the generation, right? So you can kind of control. You only get interest at age 30, and then at age 35 you can start to touch some principal, and at age 45 you can take 10% of the account. So it's kind of, that's where the trust stuff comes in. But when you're talking legacy planning, it's how are we basically strategizing taxation and maximizing benefits that are left down to beneficiaries, and then how is it ultimately being controlled once we're gone, if that's something that we care about. Most people kind of don't. It's not something that you see too often, but depending on the level of wealth, they might. And depending on the beneficiary, right? If there's like special needs trusts, that's a big reason for needing to provide some additional stipulations and structure. But that's when we're talking wealth mastery. Legacy is really like where everything's ending. And then, like you said, on the complex benefits, people with deferred compensation programs, people with restricted stock units or stock options, there's a lot of tax ramifications or things that you can do. You kind of alluded to it, where you can kind of hold on to some of your stock. You can create some different safety nets on some of the downside of those with things like options and different derivative strategies. So there's a lot there that can kind of get a little bit more complex. That's when we're really in the upper echelon of complexity. Yeah.
Can I throw in that story? I don't know if it's completely true or not, but you might have heard that Peter Thiel story of how he took all his PayPal stocks and immediately put it inside, I think, his RSA or something.
It was in a Roth. It was in a Roth.
Was it Roth?
Yeah,
was
it was all tax free. Yeah.
Just share real quickly the context of that story for people who haven't heard it.
Yeah, so basically he took his PayPal stock and he was able to put it into a Roth account. And a Roth is after tax, tax free. And I don't know the final numbers, but it was over a billion plus that ended up for him in a tax shelter, a completely tax-free account. And I mean, that is one of the best tax mastery stories that probably exists.
And this is the benefit why people do this stuff. This is the benefit. And I think that probably inspired another generation of people to try to find I mean, obviously when I talk about a lot of tech stuff, a lot of like early founders, they try to find every single way to think about like, how do I get like, whether the stock, what was this other thing called? The small, medium-sized business something. Anyways, if I remember it, I'll come back to it if anything. But two quick fire tips that I could probably mention is we talked about tax loss harvesting because this is something that people could do literally the next time they file their tax. And it's not like $1 million, but it's still a little bit of money. But what is real quickly tax loss harvesting?
So you're able to, a lot of people only want to sell their investments when they're positive, when they've made money. And this is where you start to get into these complicated systems of how you actually operate, right? So tax loss harvesting is actually capturing the losses on your investments. So and you can do it for a couple of reasons. So one is you're able to carry 3,000 of it over to your 1040, right? So you're able to actually get a deduction on your taxes from the losses that you have. And you're able to actually offset gains. So let's say you have a portfolio with 10 positions in it, and 3 of them are stock positions that have just absolutely crushed it. And let's say you had some that might be in like the commercial real estate sector right now, which has struggled since COVID. Well, you may want to sell those stock positions, but you don't want to realize the gain. Let's say you have $10,000 in gains over on the stock, and you actually have $10,000 in losses over on the real estate piece. You can actually sell both of them, right? After you wait 30 days to avoid what's called the wash sale rule, you can then rebuy either those positions or something else. You can always buy something else, but you can rebuy those same types of positions, those same asset classes, and now you've actually offset the gain, right? So let's say commercial real estate's not going to be skyrocketing in the next 30 days. You sell your position, right? You also sell your gain, and now you're not realizing any taxes because they washed each other out, right? Right there, the losses offset the gains, and then 31 days later you rebuy back your real estate piece at its similar price point, and it's kind of like nothing really changed except you were able to strategically kind of leverage the losses in your favor.
People keep on saying it's free money. It's technically you're just paying less in tax at the end of the day, which means more money in your pocket, and that's always a big plus at the end of the day. Do I dare ask this one, which is when we talk about what is it, like a backdoor IRA? It's the one where you're able to like transfer one to the other. I don't even know what it's called anymore, but that is insane. Well, not insane, but people do it.
I got you. Actually, I'm going to blow your mind on this one. All right. So you're talking about a backdoor Roth. All right. So a backdoor Roth is... So let's start with what a Roth is, just in case everyone doesn't know. What is a Roth IRA? It's a place for after-tax, tax-free money. So after we make our money from our job, right, our taxes are withheld, whatever ends up in our bank account, we can put them in one of two places. One is a place called after-tax, tax always, right? And that's going to be your brokerage account, checking account, your savings account. Any interest you make, you're paying taxes on it. The other place is after-tax, tax never, right? And this is your tax shelters. You're paying taxes on the seed, right? And the whole harvest is tax-free at the end of the day. And so that's where we love to put money. That's the spot. However, our little friends, the IRS, they have some stipulations, right? So if you wanted to put money just in a traditional Roth IRA, there's limits on this stuff, right? 5, 6, 6,500, changes every year, but you're basically maxed, right? So if you're, let's say you're making a couple $100,000 a year, I mean, is $6,000 in a Roth IRA really going to make an impact for you on your retirement? Probably not, right? If that's the max that you can put into it. However, there is this, the IRS is tricky, but they also write the law so that people can use it, right? So the people that write the law use it the best. And the backdoor Roth is one of the best kept secret in tax diversification strategies. So you can actually put money in after tax. You can put after tax money in a traditional IRA. You can put after tax money a lot of times in a traditional 401k. And so what the backdoor Roth is essentially you're taking after tax money and you're just putting in a regular IRA account. So you can put it in a regular IRA account, which it should be growing tax deferred, and it's going to be subject to these requirement distributions, but then you can convert it. There's a Roth conversion stipulation that you can convert that money into your Roth account. So it's a backdoor because you can't actually, you can put your normal amount into your Roth IRA, and then you can also put after-tax money into a traditional IRA, convert it over into your Roth. The best way to do this is the best kept secret. It all depends on where you work. If you work in a place that offers a Roth 401k, right? So Roth component to the 401k, and they offer after-tax contributions. You're allowed to contribute after tax your traditional, and they offer a Roth conversion option within the 401k. You can do this to the level of $68,000 a year, I believe is the max that you can get into Roth every year, right? You can max out your Roth 401k because there's no income limits on a Roth 401k. You can max it out. Then you can also max out the contributions, which I think is like around 50 grand after tax into your traditional, and then you can immediately convert it into your Roth. So you can put up to almost $70,000 per year into a Roth 401k for those people that are super, high earners right now and are making a lot of money. Like you said, those founders, what are some of the best ways that they can diversify their taxes and save on some of those things? When they're actually really making that, high couple $100,000 a year, this is like, that's the cream of the crop, man.
The way we're comparing it, initially we were talking about like, oh, maybe save a couple hundreds in taxes, a couple of thousands. We're pushing it down to like the tens of thousands, if not more, if anything, which is why I keep on saying I'll lose my years just talking about this. Like, I don't even work in that industry. Like, you got to live through, and you get to live through day to day, through RetireUS, through everything to be able to talk about all these fun topics. So this is just honestly the tip of the iceberg. But when we come back to RetireUS, in terms of like, you guys cover all this range of advising, and hey, here's what you get into, here's what you get into that. As like a user of RetireUS, sorry. What do I have available? What kind of products is the most popular in terms of, is it just virtual calls that you jump into, or is it the planning part? Like, what has been one of your favorite parts to work on at the moment?
One of the things, it's funny, it's so simple, but it's something that I'm really proud of is the planning cycle and the way that we really simplified this. So one of the challenges and one of the reasons why a lot of people, at least I noticed in my experience, were apprehensive to start planning was this idea of getting everything organized and trying to basically overhaul their entire financial situation, over the course of a month. And what we found is that it's kind of unnecessary to do it all at once. What makes a little bit more sense is to segment it into two key stages: goal planning and cash flow planning. And so we created this planning cycle where the first step is actually getting your goals in order. And it's this holistic process of charting out all the goals, seeing where we're at. We have a process that we call the sequential algorithm. And it's basically this reverse engineer process that helps us understand how much do we need to have at the end of the day when we take, inflation into account. And by at the end of the day, I mean at retirement, 65, whatever it may be. How much we need to be saving, right? What rate of returns we need to be targeting, how much risk we need to be taking. It helps us reverse engineer to see the path that we're on. And that gives us all the information we need on essentially how we should be structuring the investment system itself in terms of, how much risk certain buckets of money are taking, how much return we're getting in a given year. And that is about effectiveness, right? Goal planning is about effectiveness. How are we getting there? Cash flow planning is about efficiency. And, cash flow planning is really about how we're funding the plan that we put in place. So instead of making it this big overwhelming process. We start with just the goals. We take a look at where we're at. We make sure the investments are in alignment. And then once that's established, then we're going back to the cash flows and we're looking at how are we actually funding it? Is this the most tax efficient way? Is this the most effective? We have systems. Each tier has systems. We call them CFP systems. These are systems that, we collaborated with CFP's decades of experience at the end of the day to put together kind of almost like an algorithmic take and framework on specific components of the plan. And each tier has different systems. They each have two different systems that we build onto the previous tier. So basic planning has two systems. We have what's called a cash flow hierarchy, and we have this resilient retirement system. And so those are essentially frameworks, right? They're frameworks that are process based, right? It's a system for our finances. And what you may have noticed is this entire conversation that we've had, I haven't once talked about, what type of mutual fund you should be in, right? We're not talking about products. There's so much more here. And that goes back to that beginning of the conversation of the money manager piece, right? There's definitely a place and value for that component, but it all should be a result of your system, right? The system comes first, the products come second. That's the right way to approach this stuff. And each tier will then add some systems to it. So there's a cash flow system, and then there's a goal planning system into each of the tiers. And so in your wealth mastery, you're talking 3 and 3. There's 6 total systems that we're working through, and it all kind of goes back to that simplifying of we're going to do goal planning first, and we're going to do cash flow planning, and we're kind of getting this ebb and flow, and it gets the money into a routine. Right after cash flow planning's done, we cycle back to goal planning, and then back to cash flow planning, and it kind of gets things into a little bit of a system and a rhythm. And the platform helps keep that kind of all on track. Right, kind of keeps it all connected. And there's different tools that you can kind of take advantage of on the platform as well that can help give you analysis, can help build your literacy. So we try to cater to kind of everybody, but then we've tiered it in a way where, depending on what your priorities are, you can really kind of hone in and focus on what matters to you.
I guess when people talk about, there's systems here and then inside, it sounds really daunting. But as you were just demystifying everything, and even if you guys actually just look at what RetireUS offers as a platform, it shows a lot of good planners. It shows a lot of good, whether you want meetings with specific financial advisor or anything, it really puts the relevant information in front of you. Just because, I've seen a couple of the products, and that's why as a technology person, as a person who enjoys UI, UX, and all that kind of fun stuff, I just like the fact that your specialty, you and your team's specialty, of course, is translated into, if I'm a RetireUS user, I could definitely just feel it by looking at, hey, look, there's a planner. There's a planning cycle that I'm going through. Which phase am I at? I don't need to put that in my brain. It's literally something visual that could be used on the platform itself, which is absolutely great.
And that's one of the things, so at the end of the goal of the platform is to make it simple, right? Simple, easy, and affordable. That's really what we're going for with the platform. So if you're a free user, you get to the platform, there's going to be tools, and there's a resources tab that you have articles written by industry experts, and this InvestNet's a company that we're partnered with that has a function called My Blocks, which is kind of like this Netflix of financial wellness that you can kind of go through these little bite-sized modules and kind of educate yourself, and the literacy component of finance is there for you to just take it at your leisure, do it yourself. And then the paid tiers, basic, tax mastery, wealth mastery, that's where you're getting connected with an independent CFP, an independent financial professional. You have, planning to-dos, personal to-dos, a place to aggregate your investment accounts, documents to exchange, messaging for communication. We really make it just a really simple process. What I like to compare ourselves to is kind of like BetterHelp. If you've ever heard of BetterHelp for mental health, it's a really similar model and idea. It's trying to make it really easy and simple to work with an independent, systems-based professional and get it all in one place for you to make it streamlined.
The objective corporate Perry in me is what is the value prop of RetireUS? And the thing is My very short answer is that people pay $5,000, $10,000 every year for a financial advisor because by paying that $5K, they save like $100K. And like, do you know what I mean? Like, you spend money to make money at the end of the day, and the fact that you're able to really just make this as a daily off the shelf product. People could spend, as you were saying, like some of them go less than about 500 a year, if not less at that point. And you go through that and you save like thousands. It's the value prop behind it. This is an objective part of me, is that like I understand this, where it's like, yeah, you're not throwing it out the window. It's an investment. If anything, you're just investing in a product that will make your day to day more, organized and even long run. As in like, it's something that if I wasn't speaking to you, I wouldn't have known at the end of the day.
I honestly really appreciate you breaking it down that way. That I think that's the thing that a lot of people have a hard time, because it doesn't a lot of times translate. It's a little intangible in a way, right? And I think that's one of the things that hopefully through the conversation, people can start to quantify just different aspects of, even the tax conversation, right? It's all of these things. It's not about, are we getting return on our money, right? That's a part of the process. It's a very small component of what are we actually investing. We haven't talked about what we should be investing in or any of that, because it actually depends on who you are. It depends on the situation. There's so many variables before we can even get to that conversation. And those variables, though, being systematized in a way and having an approach that the way an expert would do it, there's just a way to do this stuff that is more effective than others. That's just the truth. And when we kind of start to put it all together, we end up making that money back. It's 100% an investment because of just the ramifications of taxes in the long term, or just by even protecting some assets, right? Having a good system to make sure that we're not losing our shirt if the stock market crashes, or we actually are systematically creating habits to save and getting more compounding. It's just, it all impacts the end of the story. It's just a matter of getting started. And I'm hopeful that with what we built with the platform, it's starting to remove some of those barriers of people just taking the first step, because it's like anything. You take that first step, then it's just, okay, this isn't as difficult as I thought it was going to be. This isn't as overwhelming. This is actually impactful, and it makes me feel a lot more peace of mind.
Your demystification of like system-based versus product-based and all that is probably one of my highlights of the day, if anything. But I just want to get back real quickly to Michael, yourself at the end of the day. If we talk real quickly about One with Earth, that is an absolutely cool initiative. I can't fully say if it's fully related to RetireUS or not, but it's something that I definitely do know you're very involved and great into. So what is that project?
Yeah, man, thank you for bringing that up. So this has a very near and dear place in my heart. So One with Earth, OWE. So we call wearo.org if you're interested in learning more about it. It's a nonprofit. So it's really built for humanitarian aid. We work in Haiti. So my wife, Kara, has had deep ties to Haiti for really since the earthquake. She's a nurse practitioner, and when that earthquake happened, she went over to do some service and was connected with a lot of different communities down there, and stayed in touch. And it was something that she consistently went down every year, do medical clinics and support. And in 2019, I was able to go down with her, and it was one of those experiences that was definitely life-changing. It was very eye-opening, and I'll give you the kind of the background on how this happened. So we were down there for a week, and Kara was doing a medical clinic. The schools in Haiti, so there's no public school system essentially in Haiti. So all these schools are privately funded, and they kind of become a hub for the community. And so the medical clinics will be at the school, but it won't be just for the kids. There's a lot of adults that are in the community to come by. They're getting their med exams, and so Kara was doing the clinic, and I was actually teaching some classes at the schools. And it was really just around like mindset, kind of really mindset success principles, just trying to give everybody a little bit of some frameworks for things as they were, learning and building their lives in the country. And we went, we were at a school, we went to a number of different orphanages, and Haiti is really poverty driven country, and you see a lot. We were there for a week, and you kind of thought you saw it all until we got to this last stop. And this last stop was called Damabia Orphanage. And they basically have, right now, they're about 90 kids and a couple staff. And so Kara's been sponsoring a kid at Damabia for ever since she went down there for his education. So all the education, you got to pay. Someone needs to pay for it, or otherwise you just don't get to go to school. Is the norm. And so this was kind of the final stop. We came there. We brought some different, some clothes, some toys, some food for the kids at this orphanage, and it was heavy. I mean, talk about like like for me personally, it was the heaviest thing I've ever experienced. We got there, and the kids were eating one meal every 3 days. Right, that was the situation that we walked into, and the kids were, we bought a bunch of toys. Like I said, one of those toys was sidewalk chalk. The kids were so hungry that they were eating the chalk. Like that's what was happening. Yeah, it was one of those things that just kind of like sticks with you. And that night we were chatting back at the guest house place that we were staying at. And my business background is just, the entrepreneur in me is just kind of firing. And she's got all these relationships down there. One of them was this just gentleman Mitch, he's the man, dude. He's the man. After the earthquake, he moved back from Miami to Haiti just to like help out his family and set up a transportation business. And he was the transportation guy. He was running logistics for us the whole time we were there. And just kind of off the cuff conversation, I'm talking with him like, how tough would it really be to just have Mitch deliver food to this group? Like I can't imagine it would cost that much money, right? And so I just kind of threw it out there. And my wife, being the kind-hearted person and just action-oriented person that she is, I don't even know if we were back in the States yet. She was raising money on social media to set up the first food delivery for this orphanage. And she raised enough. At the time it was only $600. Man, that's all it cost. It was $600 to get a month's worth of food for 90 people. That's all that was it. And now it's changed with inflation and what's happened. But she raised the first 600. It was incredible. We got it to Mitch. They did it first, food and water, and she did it again. And after we were kind of on like the third iteration of this, you could kind of see like there was a little bit of a shelf life on just asking our local network. And so, the business background in me, you set up a formal nonprofit, OWE, One with Earth, we named it. We set up a sponsorship program so you can sponsor one of the kids, there to help support their food. We actually partnered with another organization, and we built a school that caters to the local community. There's over almost 500, like 450 children that go to this school that we had a hand in expanding and building. And since 2019, we haven't missed a delivery. We've been doing food and water, and the whole objective of it is to really build systems. Right, back to that systems. Building systems for communities, for independence and stability at the end of the day, but independence and the ability to kind of create their own sovereignty to some extent. Now, granted, we have been stuck in a holding pattern ever since COVID, with just making sure everybody's food has spiked. The cost of food has gone from $600 for it's doubled essentially every month. And the infrastructure, the goal is to create infrastructure there and get them plugged into internet and the ability to learn remotely if they can't go to school, to be able to learn remotely, and to be able to ultimately plug into other economies, right, when they're older, so that they can do remote work and build revenue. There's really no economy right now down in Haiti. It's been overtaken by gangs right now. I don't know if you're just familiar with what's going on. It's been challenging. But our goal is we're not giving up on our community, and our goal is to take this framework. We have a framework to build these systems. We need some funding for it. Is really where we're at, because the situation is Haiti has kept us really just making sure everybody is surviving, staying alive, keeping the food coming. But since 2019, we've been going strong with this community, and shout out to all of our donors and sponsors. It's impossible. It's cool to see, Perry, how many people kind of like step up for you, and for the idea of service to others when called upon. It's been a really, really awesome experience.
No, I absolutely appreciate you just sharing all the perspectives to it, the ugliness, the prettiness behind it, and even the fact of living these small actions to the big actions. People keep on saying that, like, oh, if you're going to solve the problem, solve it completely. It doesn't work that way. It's like solve where you can, and the fact that you're able to like graduate from one to the other. The first time you even brought items to them in person, that's the immediate like shock. And then later on, when we're talking about these like systems you're developing, it's really that range on that. So I think I'm always a champion of a lot of these projects of just like hands-on. It's like hands-on. Don't worry about the blueprinting, the theory behind it. It's always been hands-on on that. But I think I don't even know where you get all this time, all this energy to do all that kind of stuff. You're a serial entrepreneur. You've done so much at the end of the day. One thing I could probably ask you, really just to close this out maybe a little bit, is the advice for people that want to jump into all this. Like, whether they call themselves a serial entrepreneur, that's not the question. The question is about how do you put your ideas or your intent into action at the end of the day. Of course, like life-changing moments that hits you in front of you, that's one of them. But maybe for the people that are in the position to be like, I want to start stuff. I want to like take what I learn and run with it. What can you tell them to think about, or to keep on pushing, or anything similar to that?
I love that question. This is something that gives me a lot of energy. Is that entrepreneurial process of taking a vision and making it, manifesting it into something real, right? Manifesting it into something tangible. And I think there's a couple things that I would say. One is you have to take a step back and clarify your vision is the first thing. And it's going to change. It's going to change over time. Especially once things get started, it will definitely change into some capacity, right? It's going to get more focused. It might change directions. You might need to pivot, but you have to kind of find that starting point of what are we working towards? If you're just trying to make money, I can promise you that's going to be the harder path. It's having like mission-driven entrepreneurship is the easiest way to do it, because you have all the energy. It doesn't matter, it's easier to have the patience. It's easier to, you need to have vision, you need to have a mission, and you need to have patience. And you also just need to be willing to just start doing something. I think people get this paralysis by analysis when it comes to entrepreneurship ventures. And I would take you back. The first entrepreneurial venture I had was my buddy. He's actually the COO of our company now, which is incredible. Jonathan Vittori. Him and I, we've been best buds since we were we know each other since we were in preschool, right? And we've been best buds forever. And we used to sneak onto this golf course by my house and sell water, and water bottles and golf balls that we would find and golf tees that we would find, and we'd sell them to the golfers. And so we would kind of sneak onto a hole. We'd set up. We would bring a little cooler out there, and we'd be at like the 14th hole or whatever, and we'd sell them for $1 a piece. Get some Gatorades, and like that's what we would do. A hot summer day, like we would get in there, and sometimes we'd get chased off, and but that was, we didn't have this massive strategy and system and game plan, and like, no, this wasn't mission driven entrepreneurship at the time. But the point, this is speaking to the action piece. It was just, we saw an opportunity. We said, all right, let's just go see what we can do here, right? Let's see what happens here. And things would change. Sometimes we had to adapt and go to different holes, right? Because the security was looking at the holes that we were sneaking onto. We had to switch up our game plan. But it was just that point of taking action was always, I think that's where everybody misses, right? They have these grand ideas, they have, a mission, or they have something they want to achieve. And then it's this fear of being judged, or it's this fear of it not working. Like, guess what? Some people are going to judge you, and a lot of times, most of the time, it's not going to work. That's just how that's okay, right? If you just keep moving, the reality is most people may judge you for 1 second, and then they're just worried about themselves. No one's focused on you, and you have to iterate to win. That's just how life works. So if you can just get out of your own way to step into, your power in action, like, you're going to start to win, right? It may take time, and that's where the patience comes in, and you need vision because you need to know where you're going. But those 4 components, like, that's the special sauce, right? And then grit, like, you got to have grit. I'll throw that in there too. Like, that's probably the major 5th key piece. Like, you just got to be willing to get punched in the face and just, like, keep smiling.
I think a lot of that just summarizes your journey. I keep on saying, like, a lot of those, like, summarizes what you've done so far, what you keep on doing. Was this a quote that I heard? I don't know who's it from. It's like, somebody was like, I'm not afraid of somebody stealing my idea. I'm afraid of somebody who steals my idea and does something about it. Like, I feel like that is kind of essentially what we're trying to say, is that, yes, take your ideas, run with it. And I don't think those are bad advices for anybody at the end of the day. So where can people find more of Michael? Where can people find more of RetireUS? Like, what is the best way to find you guys on the internet?
Yeah, so RetireUS, LinkedIn. I do post a decent amount of content on LinkedIn, so you can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram at Mike Scar. Those are probably some of the best areas, and then at RetireUS for our socials, at RetireUS on LinkedIn, on Instagram. Good places to keep tabs on what's going on with us.
And of course, all of those will be shared in the description notes below, so definitely check it out over there. But I can't thank you enough. You've shared so many stories, but the tips that people could actually do literally tomorrow. But overall, on behalf of Perry, on behalf of everyone, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, man. Absolute pleasure.
And of course, more to come, and I'll catch you all in the next one. See ya.
See ya.
And that was Michael Scarpati, founder and CEO of RetireUS. All the links are shared in the description notes below. Go check them out. If you would like to be on Podcast Room by a Software Engineer, reach out to us. Just email contact@perrytiu.com. Can't wait to have you on the show. Once again, thank you so much for listening to Podcast Room by a Software Engineer. Don't forget to hit the follow button on your podcast app and leave us a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It's completely free. And if you want to tell your friends about Podcast Room by a Software Engineer, that's totally cool as well. Anyways, I am Perry Tiu, and I'll catch you on the next one. Big love.